Biwater is still searching for a viable raw water source and has asked government for an extension of the November 30, 2012 water delivery date. Having not found an adequate raw water supply after testing at Parakeeta Bay and Brandywine Bays, the UK company Biwater has submitted an application to the Town and Country Planning Department for approval to access water from the sea through the mangroves at Parakeeta Bay. According to Minister for Communication and Works Mark Vanterpool, who was responding to a question posed by opposition member Julian Fraser, Biwater requested the 6-month extension for water delivery to begin after the Town and Country Planning Department gives its approval.
Biwater was expected to get raw water from wells, and they indicated earlier that the wells were not providing the water they were expecting, and therefore they proposed to get water, raw water from a source at sea by going through the Parakeeta Bay pond. The latest has been that the application required an EIA report of how this would affect the pond and the seabed. That EIA report, as was being provided by Biwater, came to the ministry on the 23rd, I believe, I suggested, of August, which is about a week ago or so, 10 days ago. That report has gone to town planning, and town planning is proceeding with the necessary steps. And as I recall, the extension they're asking for is to be 6 months following the approval of the application that they have in presently to the town planning. So we're probably looking at 6 months from whatever date that approval will be.
Access to raw water source is one of 2 vital components in the Biwater agreement. The other is electricity, which Fraser says is required for the production of water. Minister Vanterpool said the ministry is reviewing the application and expects to provide the electricity. Fraser also listed several obligations under the water purchase agreement that are required before the company begins to produce the 2.3 million gallons of water per day to government. Obligations that include 2 600 gallons reservoirs at Sabbath Hill, the making of provision to move water directly from Sabbath Hill reservoirs to the Fort Hill reservoirs, the upgrading of the Ridge Road distribution line, and the making of a provision to move water directly from Sabbath Hill reservoir to the Hannah Hill reservoir.
Madam Speaker, it is very unlikely that the 4 items in question will be available at the required delivery date of November 30th. However, all efforts will be made by the ministry to have them in place as soon as possible. We will be making submissions for these works to be considered in the ministry's 2013 capital budget.
It is imperative that these measures be in place in order for him to accept the 2.3 million gallons of water. And if it is in his opinion, that if he does not accept the 2.3 million gallons of water, he has to pay Biwater for the 2.3 million gallons of water, or he will fall into a contingent liability situation.
The contract calls for a certain rate to be paid for water that we receive, and a lower rate, I believe, to be paid for water that is not received, but it has to be paid for in any case.
Minister Vanterpool said all efforts will be made for those components to be in place as soon as possible, and they will be making submissions for the works to be considered in the ministry's 2013 capital budget. Despite excessive delays, Biwater continues its efforts to implement a now 2.5-year-old controversial contract. The Premier, in response to a question from Mr. Fraser on the issue of contingent liability, said government has to ensure that no further contingent liabilities are developed.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Overseas Territories clearly stated that the Biwater project presented a continued liability to the government of the BVI and requested the then Premier to seek assistance in determining how to deal with that contingent liability. I have seen no indication that his opinion has changed after the then Premier received the opinion to which the Minister referred. What is now the case is that the Minister of Works and Communications must work to ensure that no further contingent liabilities are developed by meeting the obligations the government has for the project, and he's doing so.
Biwater has also pushed back the commissioning of the Sabbath Hill Reservoir, which was expected to be commissioned by the end of August. According to Minister Vanterpool, the reservoir could not be commissioned because of the problem with the float valve preventing the tank to be filled to capacity and the sweating that was observed along the base of the tank during the testing phase.